I'm Sofia Bernardi, mindset and business coach, supporting ambitious new and rising coaches to master their mindset, create an aligned and profitable strategy, and grow a six-figure business using the Rising Coach method. I built a multi-six-figure business by the age of 24, and in this podcast, I will teach you the psychology, strategy, and energetics to do the same. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to Rising Coaches with Sofia Bernardi. I am so grateful you are here and I just look forward to these episodes so much. But today, guys, I'm not joking. I just finished this episode recording with Jaci Rogash and oh my God, I am speechless with how incredible this was. It's a bit of a long one, but it's worth listening to in all honesty because she shares so many golden nuggets that are going to support you if you are considering starting a business, you have started a business, and it's just such a beautiful conversation. So Jaci is a certified transformation and mindset coach who speaks and works with game changers, right? The big-hearted women who are ready to step into their fullest potential, but parts of their past are holding them back from embracing their true self. So Jaci grew up in country Victoria and she'll share her whole story, which honestly left me completely speechless with a million goosebumps. Like, wait till you hear it. And she is just no stranger to trauma and adversity herself, right? Having been a victim of bullying, sexual assault, family violence, and stalking before the age of 24. So there is a lot of deep and dark conversations actually in the beginning of the episode. So if any of that triggers you, just a little warning there. But in my opinion, she spoke about it so beautifully and I think held space for people that may have gone through this or are going through this, and really provides a lot of value around these topics that really need to be spoken about more. So with 11 years of experience working in trauma, enforced roles, dealing with sexual assaults, family violence, mental health, grief, and much more, Jaci now empowers her clients to move through their self-doubt, their self-sabotage, fear of judgment, and unhealthy subconscious patterns so that they can discover a genuine happiness that, they've never been able to experience, reignite this inner spark, and ultimately discover their true self. So Jaci now lives in Melbourne with her partner and their son and their cat. Whilst embracing new motherhood, she's also learning about, a new cycle of life and loves adventure sports, getting outdoors, and just, lives her best life. So enjoyed this episode. You're going to love it. And then come chat to me on Instagram, share the episode with anyone that you think might resonate with this, because honestly, I feel like this will be so beneficial, this conversation that we have today. And just enjoy, in all honesty. And I can't wait to speak to you guys on Instagram. Thank you for reviewing, leaving comments, all of the things. It means so much to me. And enjoy the episode. Hey, Jaci, how are you?
I'm really well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm so excited about today. For those that don't know, I was recently on Jaci's podcast, so I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes because we had a great conversation over there as well. But today I want it to be all about you. And I was reading into your story, obviously, and we work, around the same people, and I've known you for quite a while now. But I didn't know that much about your story, and it sounds like you've actually been through quite a lot on your journey. And I only know the side of you that is passionate, confident, successful, and all the things. So I think it would be such a great opportunity to kick off by just sharing whatever you feel comfortable with around your story, because I think it will be such a great example for people that feel like they can't help people because they've gone through challenges or maybe going through challenges. I think, you're just such a great example that you can turn everything around at any point. So do you want to share a little bit about how you got here, I suppose?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a big story. And often I find that people who have been through a lot or have experienced trauma do want to help other people, but then there's that piece of like, how do I do that? So my story, to keep it short, because there's a lot, and obviously if you want me to dive into anything else, let me know. I grew up in country Victoria, had a really good upbringing, like very much a country girl, camping every school holidays. We've traveled Australia, did a lot of really cool things. And I guess my troubles started in primary school. So I got picked on and bullied a little bit in primary school, partly because I'm hairy. Thanks, Dad. And because kids can be assholes, let's be honest. And secondly, because I was really good at sport, and I feel like I sometimes got knocked down a peg or two because of that. And then I went to a different high school than all of my primary school friends and got bullied there again and really isolated by a couple of, like one in particular, but a couple of people. So year 7 and 8 was a real struggle for me. I thought I'd found this new group of friends only to find out that one of them really didn't like me and made my life really challenging. And I think that sort of started my journey with blending in and wearing masks. I really wanted to be liked. So I just kind of lost who I was because I wanted to be liked. I didn't want to be picked on. I wanted to be part of these group of people. Then at 15, I was sexually assaulted. So I was raped by a guy that I knew. And then he said to me straight after, "Don't scream rape." So for 8 months, I didn't tell anyone. I hit a really, really dark place. Was suicidal, attempted to take my life once. But as I said, didn't tell anyone. It was only when he was from a different town, when he came back to our town, that I told anyone. So that kind of started my life with, I guess, my journey with depression, I should say. So for 15 years after that, I lived with cyclical depression. But for those 8 months, it was a very, very dark time. Then when I was 21, I left a really loving relationship purely because we were at different stages in our lives. He was ready to settle down and start a family, and I was not. And I was also chasing what I didn't have, because at 21, we all want what we don't have. And I entered a relationship with a very controlling, manipulative, abusive, not physically abusive. Like, I did get chased with a baseball bat, but he didn't never actually physically laid a hand on me. Person. So that was I guess I had an experience with domestic violence. And not that at 21 you don't realize that it's domestic violence. It's only later on, working in the police force and within the university sector managing family violence, that you realize what you've been through. Then at 23, I had a stalker. That was someone that I met through an online dating site, who pretended to be someone else. And then when I met him, I was like, whoa. So I just made up an excuse to leave. And then 8 months later, started getting these really filthy messages, and I didn't know who it was, which turned into dick pics, which turned into police investigating it and him being arrested and charged with stalking. And then I joined the police force, and I'd always wanted to join the police force. I have quite a few family members who were cops, and I thought that was going to be my place, my be all end all. I wanted to help people, as cliche as it sounds, but it was fun, it was really fun. Every day was different. And then I should have mentioned, when I was 19, I dabbled in recreational drugs. I was very, very anti-drugs. And then for my 19th birthday, my best friend bought me a pill, because that's what you do in the country. So for a couple of years, I partied, experimented. It was never an addiction or anything like that, but it was, had a lot of good times. Joined the police force, loved that. And then I guess my past, in terms of like the partying days, caught up with me in the sense of, and it's a very convoluted story, so I'll try and keep it simple. But basically, someone that I knew was up to no good and used me as a bit of a scapegoat, and there was some other stuff happening with other people around me that I had no idea about. So I kind of got caught in the middle, and then I left the police force, and that was probably my darkest time. And I think it was predominantly because everything that I had experienced, I had suppressed. So when you join the police force, you become very disjointed, very detached from emotions. You just soldier on, like I was that confident person that never felt anything, like I just got the job done type thing. And then when I went through this, everything just came back. and bearing in mind behind the scenes through all of this, every 6 to 8 months, I would, go through that cyclical depression for a couple of weeks. So I was navigating all of this stuff in the background that no one ever knew about. But then when I left the police force, because it had become my identity, I was a cop. It wasn't a job for me. Like, that's who I was. All of my friends were cops. That was my be all and end all. And I remember when I went and saw a few psychologists and they were rubbish. And then I found my psychologist, who's amazing. And I sat down and she's like, what can we do? I'm like, I'm a cop. She's like, no, you're not. That's your job. I'm like, no, I'm a cop. She's like, no, that's not who you are. And it took a bit to sort of navigate that identity piece and for anyone that has sort of, I guess, been in the police force or fireys or like any of those sort of emergency services, it does become a lot of your identity. And so yeah, I was navigating all of this stuff. And I just remember there was one day where I and trigger warning here, was so depressed that I couldn't see a way out and was going to end my life. And I was sitting in my kitchen with a knife to my wrist. And I'm like, I just can't do this anymore. And the only reason I didn't end it that day was because of my parents and my partner at the time, because I didn't want them to have to clean up the mess, basically. And so that and it was in that moment, and not everyone has this moment, but for me, it was in that moment I said that I wanted to turn my life around, because it was either to live or to die. And if I was going to live, I wanted to live. I didn't want to just survive. I didn't want to be unhappy anymore. I wanted to make that lowest point in my life the turning point, the pivotal piece to creating the most successful and abundant life I could imagine. And, it's not as simple as just saying that. There was so many challenges that I had to navigate after that. And in that moment, I had no idea that I was going to become a coach. It was like, I have no idea what I'm going to do, but I just can't do this anymore. And, I suffered like severe anxiety at that time, like to the point if anyone knocked on my door, I would hide behind my bed. Like, it was just so overwhelming. The only real reason I left my house was to go to the gym. So the gym has always been my saving grace. Like, it has been the one thing that has literally saved me. So when they talk about mental health and physical exercise, I can absolutely testify that, like, it saved my life. So then fast forward, a lot of healing that started my healing journey. Working with a psychologist who also worked with a coach and it was like, let's figure out what you're going to do with your life. And I juggled with psychology. And she mentioned that her best friend was a coach. And at the time she said, oh, she charges more than me an hour. And I was like, what is this? And I'd heard of coaching, but didn't really understand it. And so I started looking into it. And then, I just went down the path. I obviously was working at a university as an investigation risk assessment specialist. So still dealing with a lot of trauma. So mental health, sexual assault, family violence, bullying, that kind of thing. And I thought that was, my dream job. And then when I started coaching, I was like, oh no, this is where I'm meant to be. So I grew my business while I was working full time. And then the rest's history, really, as they say.
I'm like, I have got no words. I've got full body goosebumps. That's a crazy story. Like, you've actually been through so much, it's not even funny. And for you to like be here now to talk about it quite confidently, actually, without a lot of emotion attached, which shows you've really healed a lot of that, is really incredible. And then more so to now be able to help others through things like that is just crazy. So now everyone's got a really clear picture on, where you were and then how you got into coaching. At what point though did you feel ready? Like, after, how much healing did you have to do before you actually felt confident and ready and able to help other people with those challenges? Because I can imagine hearing other people's stories, it brings back a lot of your experiences potentially, right?
It's a really good question. And I think it's sort of twofold, because when I was in the police force, family violence is so rampant in Australia. So we dealt with that. Mental health also was a huge part of our role. And as I said, so it was probably, I showed a lot of compassion to anyone that was a victim of stalking, because stalking isn't taken seriously enough. To the point I remember someone was getting sent flowers and gifts from someone that they didn't know and reporting it to the police, and a cop turned around and said, you should be grateful that someone's sending you gifts. Like, it's pretty scary. So I think when I was there, I was helping, and I always wanted to help more than what the police force does. But at that time, I was very much of the opinion that I could never, ever work on a sexual assault. Right? Like, I wanted to be a detective, but I never wanted to work with Socket, who deal with sexual assault and child abuse. So I was helping people to an extent there. And then when I left there, and I should just preface this quickly by, like, I talk about it now without showing much emotion, but that's because I've told my story so often.
Yeah.
I've really gone to that place, and there are still moments when I do get a bit tripped up by certain parts that make me a little bit emotional. But when I first, I guess, started healing through my sexual assault, which was 15 years after it happened, it was messy. Like, it was really, really messy. There was a lot of tears, a lot of suppressed emotions and everything else to work through, and for years, right, for a couple of years. Then when I started at the university, because it was victim centric, it was a different approach. It was a very different approach to the police force. And I think because I'd started my healing journey, I felt so much more compassion for other people. So I'd started to discover my own emotions and become a little bit more whole myself, a little bit more attached, a little bit more self-aware, a little bit more compassionate and understanding of me and everything that, like, all of my emotions and all of my characteristics, but also other people. So at the university, we really helped people, and I think it was easy to support them and easy for them to feel comfortable with me. And not that I told them what I'd been through, but because I could empathize with them, they felt comfortable. And so that was one piece. And then with coaching, I think by the time I started coaching, I'd really done all of the work. There was maybe one little piece that I hadn't fully owned, that I kept a little bit of a secret. And then as I worked through that, and as I got, I guess, more confident in my own ability, it just became easier and easier. But I think just the compassion and the empathy gave me that. And I remember a story when I was 15. So after I was assaulted, and entered a lot of self-sabotaging, toxic behavior, right? Shit relationships, drama, shit friends. I had some amazing friends, don't get me wrong, but like, I wasn't comfortable when I was younger, when I was a teenager. It's probably like from 15 to 23, I wasn't comfortable if things in my life were good. Like, I needed some level of drama to feel comfortable, because that's what I had come to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the story that I told myself was, oh, bad shit happens to me so I can help other people. A 15-year-old, 16-year-old, I had no idea what that meant, but that was the story that I told myself. And that's probably how I survived subconsciously. And now I look back, I'm like, wow, like, it really was. I always wanted to help other people, and I always tried to, but I really couldn't help other people until I helped myself.
Thank you for sharing that. I relate to that last part quite a bit. I remember I at one point had this story that I was here just to fix people, and once I fix them, they would leave me. Horrible. Such a horrible thought. So, like, as soon as I would get into a relationship and I would help them and make them become a better person, and then they would go. And that's like such a damaging narrative that, thank God, is gone. So totally relate to that. So you mentioned before, though, that at times, triggers do come up, which is very normal. And I really want to speak into that, because I think the more new coaches or people considering starting a business, the more they can really hear that, hey, you don't have to be perfect and have things together 24/7 to help people or to do what you love. Like, I think the better. I really want to normalize that conversation. So I have no doubt that triggers, wounds, fears, doubts do come up time to time, despite having done all of that work and helping people through that, right? So, and I know for you and I, that's such an obvious thing, but for some people, they truly don't think that. So, how do you navigate that, knowing what you now know?
It's a really good question. And triggers don't get talked about enough. Being triggered is kind of one of those taboo words along with trauma, where people kind of like, oh, should I use this? Should I not? Like, and there's still a little bit of a stigma of if someone uses those words, they're attention seeking or whatever. And I think it's really important to just normalize the fact that we all have stuff. Like everybody has stuff that we've been through. And in my opinion, the best coaches are people that have experienced tough times. Right. And I'm not like, I don't actually know a strong person who hasn't been through something, who hasn't experienced a tough time. I'm trying to think of someone, but I'm
Part
sure
of
like,
life.
everyone.
Like it's just
Yeah,
part of
exactly.
life. Stuff happens.
Yeah. And so I think the important thing is when you first start coaching, it's the same as anytime you first start anything.
Yeah.
Your fear is the greatest. Your inner critic is the loudest. Your inner mean girl is the bitchiest. You know, you are going to doubt yourself more than ever. And when you first start coaching, it's like, who am I to do this? Like, I'm just a country girl, or I don't come from money, or who's going to pay me to help them? How can I support them? Like, there's so many things that come up. And I think one key message is, you know, if you want to work in a field, be mindful of not starting that until you know that you can hold it, that you can hold space for someone else, and like you'll be okay. But I think for me, like being triggered now happens very, very rarely. And I actually see it as a really good thing because I see it as a way to grow. But for my clients, when they're triggered, it can triggered can, you know, it has obviously varying levels of response. And if we've been hiding from something, if we've been suppressing something, if we haven't dealt with something, and, you know, maybe we had an abusive relationship in the past or something. I'm just trying to think of something off the top of my head. And if you've left that person and then you randomly bump into them, it's so normal that you are going to be triggered, right? Seeing them having to deal with that, like all of these things that are subconsciously just sitting there lying dormant are going to surface. So firstly, like to talk through how to manage that, like just stop and pause. You know, the question I always ask myself is, am I okay? In this moment, am I okay right now? Like I take a couple of breaths. I'm like, am I okay? I'm like, yep. And then I just find a little bit of space. And then when I'm able, I just reflect on why. Like, why was I triggered by that? And what needs to be healed? Like, what needs to be seen and looked at and acknowledged? So as you continue to do that work, as you start your self-development, you get to know every part of you, right? So you know what triggers you know what the stories are, and you'll know this, like we're kind of cyclical beings. Whenever we do something new, it's like, oh, this story's back again. Okay, here we go. And you know how to navigate it because you're used to doing it. Whereas when you first start, it's kind of like this overwhelming sense of triggers, inner critic, self-belief, and it's like, fuck. And it can be enough. And ultimately, that's why so many people don't start, right? Because that fear and the noise that starts, the triggers gets too much. And it's like, oh, let me just come back into my comfort zone because that's just way easier than dealing with all of this stuff. So I think it's, and I've kind of lost the question, so I'm sorry for going on a rant, but I think it's more like just acknowledging when something comes up and then taking some time to sit with it and realize why, and ultimately coming back to what it is that you want and not allowing something else external to stop you from achieving that.
Yeah, I think there's so many golden nuggets that you just said there, but I think something that just came up for me is like, yeah, when you start anything new, like driving a car, riding a bike, starting a business, like a new job even, of course, you're so right. Your inner critic is going to be the absolute loudest. And I think there's this misconception that once you reach a certain point, whether that's 10K months or six figures or $1 million, like these problems are going to be gone. Like I'm telling you, and Jackie, we work in the same space. Everyone still has fear, right? It's just different levels of fear. It's more subtle maybe, or even maybe not. Like everyone still experiences fear and doubt and has those limitations. And that's why I try my very best to be as transparent as possible, in particular with my clients, to normalize their experience. Like I tell them about the 1.5 million breakdowns I had when I first started my business, so that they know that what they're experiencing is normal. Because when I started my business, half the reason I had such a hard time, taking action and getting results and things like that is because I was comparing myself to everyone's highlight reels on social media. And I, honest to God, thought I was the only one that had these fears and doubts. And so I love bringing on, obviously, incredible guests to the podcast and me speaking into it as well, how normal it is to experience those big waves of emotions, like deep emotions when you start something new. Like, my personal belief is that if you want to heal and grow, your three biggest teachers in life will be your relationship, your children, and your business. Like, I just think those three things bring up all of your shit and more. And in a good way, if you have the right support and learn how to navigate it, right? And I can't tell you how much starting a business has really taught me. It's highlighted every fear, every doubt, every trauma. It's all just come up from having a business, because you're just faced with so much uncertainty all of the time. So thank you for sharing that, because I really think that'll be so nice for people to hear that, oh, this is normal. This is okay. Like, maybe I can do it.
I think it's one of those things, as you know, like, when it first arrives, you're like, holy shit, like, this is a level of fear that I've never experienced before. Because when you start a coaching business, when you become a coach, it's like, you can't hide behind anything else, right? You are it. And it's like, you have to own your shit. Right. And there is this misconception of everyone has to be perfect. And Instagram, as you know, can be such an incredible tool for connection. It can be also such a harmful tool for the highlights reel. And, you know, if anyone follows me, you'll know that I share everything. Well, not everything, but like, I share those dark days, I share the tough times, but I also share the highlights. Like, I think it's important to share, like, understand that, as you said, it is normal. But as you continue, it's kind of like the first time fear shows up, it's petrifying. As you start to embrace it a little bit more, you're like, oh, okay, it's not so scary. And as you said, it will, every time you up level, every time you move through a different stage, every time you put out a new program, anytime you promote something new, every time you talk on stage, you will have a level of fear, but it's more becoming friends with fear as opposed to fear controlling you.
Yeah, dance with the fear. Like, it's not really going to go away if you're in this journey of growth and healing and very big, ambitious goals. It's going to be there. And just understanding why the brain does that. It wants to keep us safe and secure. And so it just thinks that everything that is, you know, in your comfort zone is what's safe. And we just need to have that level of awareness of that, okay, actually, you know, posting a post about something I'm passionate about on social media isn't some tiger that's going to come and eat me 2.5 seconds later. Like, it's actually going to be okay, you know? And so I think just like that awareness of what fear actually is. Like, I was joking with one of my friends the other day, how funny is it we are so afraid of emotions, like just different vibrations in our body. We build it up like it's this horrible thing, and it's actually just an emotion. And if we can just learn to sit in all the various different emotions and make peace with them, that's actually the fastest way to move through them. It's when you resist and avoid feeling something and like suppressing it, that it becomes worse. And, you know, just to go back, speaking to what we were saying before around, you know, every time you level up, these fears come up, right? I really feel like it doesn't get easier. We just get better. We get better at understanding it. Like, it was the funniest thing when I was starting my business. I noticed it was the very start of every single month. Like, the first of every month, this fear would creep in on, I would have a great month the month before. And I'm like, it's not going to happen again this month. Like, that was just, and I would justify why I had a great month last month and why it will not happen again. And it was just this protective mechanism, but I had to go through this mind drama for the first 2 weeks of every single month. And it was so painful. And it just got to the point eventually where I started to laugh at it, because I'm like, oh, here we go again. Fear's going to come in. It's the first of the month. And my coach actually really helped me with this, to completely flip it, where instead of being in fear for the first 2 weeks of the month, why don't you celebrate the previous month for the first 2 weeks of the month and be in that energy? And that was a total game changer for me, where this fear like started to not disrupt my day every single day. And of course, I still experience fear, but just not in those huge chunks anymore, because I understand exactly why it's coming up. I'm aware of my triggers and things like that, and can navigate it and have enough evidence behind me now that it's actually going to be okay. And I think that's one of the incredible benefits of having a coach and being supported, is being around people that get it, have experienced it, have overcome it, and just that proximity of normalizing what it is you're doing to make it less scary. Like, you know, when we first start a business, talking about money and things is so scary, right? But then when you hang out with people that are earning millions of dollars, all of a sudden you're throwing numbers around left, right, and center because those around you are doing the same. And I think it's when you normalize it that you believe it's possible, and then it comes to fruition. So proximity is so
absolutely.
undervalued.
Interrupting this podcast episode quickly, because if you're loving this episode, it would mean the world to me if you shared my podcast to your Instagram stories. All you have to do is screenshot this episode and share it to your Instagram stories, tagging me at Sofia Rose Bernardi. I would love to connect with you.
Absolutely. But I also think I look at fear as a good thing.
Yeah.
If fear shows up for me, then it means that I'm doing something that's meaningful.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay. Whereas if I don't have fear or any resistance or anything like that, I kind of sit back and I'm like, what am I doing? Not necessarily wrong, but a big part of the work that I do, and similarly for you, is getting people to step out of their comfort zone. And so if I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh yeah, cool, every day is sweet, like I don't have a drama, I sort of take a step back and go, well, hang on a second, like, where am I playing it safe? Like, where am I not expanding? And not that I'm saying that you need to be doing outrageous things all the time, but it's just like, where do you want to improve? What do you want to focus on? And using that fear as a really positive thing. And just on emotions, quickly, we all experience every single emotion, right? But we have this belief that some emotions are bad. And I never use the word bad emotions. Sometimes our emotions can be unhealthy depending on how they're showing up for us. But we need to acknowledge that we need to acknowledge that you, like, every single person listening experiences every single emotion. And if you're sitting there being like, no, I don't experience this, I don't have this, you don't know what you're talking about, I'm not sure, like, do some shadow work. And shadow work is really acknowledging what you're ignoring. But emotions are a great thing. They support you, as you said, to move through it. And the more you suppress, you're just suppressing and holding energy that isn't going to serve you, and it's going to come out somehow. And if you don't deal with it there and then, usually it comes out in a way that isn't supportive.
Yeah, exactly. And I really believe that your thoughts create your feelings. So it's the stories you tell yourself that create your feelings. And we have the power to choose what it is we're thinking. And then I've had a few people every now and again say, but then why do you ever feel sad if you know how to do that? And it's like, because some things you actually want to be sad about. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, if your dog died and you just chose to be happy about that, like, I would be more concerned
You're a psychopath.
about that. Yeah, exactly.
Like, you're actually a psychopath.
Sure, we can choose what it is we want to feel, but sometimes we actually should feel those quote unquote bad emotions. So I'm completely on the same page. They're all neutral. They all serve a really powerful purpose, because there's a flip side to all of them, right? So like we just said, right? Like, if you didn't get upset if someone close to you passed away or something like that, like, I think we would jump to the conclusion that there's something quite, not right if you're not feeling that emotion, right? And the other thing I just had a mental blank, but I was just gonna say, like, we want to feel those emotions. And the flip side is with fear, right? Is, imagine if you find it so uncomfortable feeling fear, right? So if it was gone and then you're actually one day in a dangerous situation and you didn't experience that emotion, you might not be here, right? Like, so the emotion is helpful in certain situations to actually alarm us of situations, people, environments that don't serve us. So it's really about learning, when the emotion is really serving us and what it's trying to tell us. So I'm on the complete same page. I don't think there's good and bad. I think it's just learning how to sit in them, navigate them, understand them, and just know it's literally just vibrations in your body.
Yeah, 100%.
So, just wrapping up now, what advice would you give to my audience who are typically people considering starting a business or have just started a business, but they have these thoughts of, I'm just not ready yet, you know, I'm not good enough, or I can't because of XYZ reasons, whether that's time or have jobs or children, because I know that you started your business whilst full-time, you have children, like you have all of those things that some people use, you know, as reasons why they can't have what it is they want. What advice would you give to people that sort of are running those stories in their head?
Yeah. I think if you know it's what you want to do, and obviously I feel like coaching is one of those things where you know, right? You know if you want to be a coach, and you will have a reason why. Staying connected to that is so, so important. The stories that run in your head are just your ego, right? It's, if you look at, you know, nearly all of the most well, that's a very bold statement. So many, I'm not going to say all, so many incredibly successful people have experienced such tough times. You know, Tony Robbins, Oprah, they're like the first two that come to my mind, but there's like so many people.
They all
You're just
have.
like,
The most inspiring
Mel Robbins.
people.
Yeah, Mel Robbins is another one. Like so many people, so many people have experienced really, really tough times. And I think, again, just understanding that it is just a story. And I think when you have a story, a really good question, well, two questions that I always ask myself is this real or is it a story? So is what I'm telling myself the truth, or is it just a story I'm telling myself because I'm scared or my ego is getting in the way? And the other thing is, what's the worst thing that can happen? So if you're like wanting to start, but you're just not, you're like teetering on the edge of starting, or you're not making the decision or not making a commitment, and especially like signing coaches, it's always the big one. If you're like, oh, I really want to, but ask yourself, like, what's the worst thing that can happen? And generally 99.9% of the time, the worst thing that can happen is that nothing changes. Maybe you make an investment and you don't get the return. You're not going to get the return if you don't show up, firstly, but you're still going to make the money back somehow, right? So it's kind of like nothing changes. So for me, when I first started, I was working full-time. I didn't have a child then. So I was working full-time in quite a demanding role, and I was training a lot. So I was training twice a day, 3 times a week, and both Saturday and Sunday. So training a lot. And I literally sat there and had fortnightly calendar. I did it on a spreadsheet because I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to admin and stuff like that. And I blocked out the hours that I worked. I blocked out the hours that I trained. And then I blocked out the times that I would be working on in my business. So whether that was client calls, whether it was admin, whether it was systems, whatever it was. So it was one of those things where, and I had a really honest conversation with my partner at the time. So if you're in a relationship, that communication is hugely important. And I was like, this is my diary. And I made sure that I still had space for me. Like, it wasn't like I was working 24/7, but it was like, you know, on weekends, I might only work until 12 or 2. So I would always have the afternoon and evening. And then I would have one night off during the week, but I knew when I was working. So I was kind of like, okay, cool. I'm finishing work now. I'm going home to work on my business, or I'm going to the gym, or I'm doing this. And like self-care and my mindset work is always, has always been a huge part of my life. So that's like a non-negotiable that is in there every day. So I think it's navigating what your excuses are and actually like counteracting them, like proving your excuses wrong and just doing it, because what's the worst thing that can happen? And I think the biggest thing is, do you want to live with regret? Do you want to be sitting there going, oh, I really want to start this business, but I'm just going to stay in this job that makes me feel like shit or doesn't fulfill me, and bitch and moan about things that just don't even matter, when I could be focusing on something that really supports me? And I think it's, comparisonitis is a huge thing, right? A comparisonitis is a huge thing when you first start coaching, because you start to see, and obviously Facebook ads, they're watching. So you'll start to have all of these people pop into your feed who are making so much money, who are doing all of these things, who are always happy in air quotes, And we start to make ourselves wrong for not having that. Whereas what if you flip that and used who you see as maybe competition or who you're comparing yourself to as inspiration instead?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, I guess it's doing the mindset work is the first part, but being really, really self-aware about what you're telling yourself, whether it's real or whether it's a story, and how can you use that as fuel to light your fire and to help you progress as opposed to stopping you. And the other thing, get support. Always get support. Everything is easier with support. Sure, you might achieve what you want without support, but it's going to take a hell of a lot longer to get there.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing is that money replenishes, but time doesn't. So what are you waiting for?
Yeah.
Like if you have the thought, if you're walking around, driving around every day thinking about what it is you want and you're not taking action, no wonder you're not feeling good because you're out of alignment completely, right?
Yeah.
So just, yeah.
And I just want to share for people that just to normalize like our visions, right? So I wanted to be a coach. I started that part-time while I was working full-time. And I reckon for 6 months, everyone in the inner circle were like, when are you quitting? When are you quitting? And I'm like, not yet, not yet, not yet. And then it got to the point where I'm like, okay, I can't justify still working. Like it was either my business was going to be impacted because I was working full-time. So I'm like, no. So I took the leap and quit my job. And I was very cautious. It was one of those things where I wanted to know that I like the logistics of it, how much do I need to live? How much do I have? How long can I survive on what I have? Like all of that sort of stuff. So I was very cautious. But when I took the leap and then 2 months after going full-time in my business, I found out that I was pregnant. So my son was an accident. And I can tell you right now, like that fear, everything that came up, like that self-doubt, like, fuck, where is the money going to come from? Because I no longer had a 6-figure income coming in on the side. It was all on me. I was like, that was real. And so many people were like, just go back to your job. And I'm like, well, no, because I have this business. And I've been working in my business since Hunter was born. He's now 9 months. And, at the start, I probably worked a lot more than I do at the moment because they sleep a lot more when they're babies. And right now it's kind of one of those things where I know that I'm in this for the long haul, right? Like my business is my future. It is my life. Like it's what I'm doing for the rest of my life. So even though there's a period right now where I'm not, and I guess it's looking at, the seasons that you're in, as you said, like you don't have any children. So you're like, I'm good. Like I've got so much time. For mums, it can be a little bit harder because you do have to juggle it, but you still have time, right? You can always make time just because you don't have as much time as someone else. Like we all have the same amount of time in the day, but obviously depending on what you need to juggle. But it doesn't mean that you just give up. Like this is the universe. The universe will test you is the other thing. And I know we're wrapping up, but the universe will always test you. So if you declare that you want something, the universe will throw a challenge at you. So when we were in Bali, it was like we were in Bali recently and I knew that I was coming back to 6 weeks, that really I had no extra time to work on the back end of my business. And I'm in the like strategy stage. And I got offered 2 jobs while I was away. And I was like just randomly contacted by people that I knew. They're like, hey, I've got this job. Do you want to come and work for me? And I was like, And I mentioned it to my mum. Mum's like, well, maybe you should. I was like, why would I do that? And she's like, well, it'd just be easier to make that money. I'm like, but then I can't work in my business. And she's like, yeah, I know. And I'm like, no, so it's sort of like when you know, but you will always be tested. So if you declare that you want something else and then, a previous story or the safe option shows itself up, just be really aware of which option you take.
Yeah, I love that. I think I talked about that on your podcast episode, actually. That was something that happened to me. Like I declared, like, I'm ready for, this next level of my business. And then that following month, I was faced with every challenge possible. And I now know on the other side why. That was actually, I had to clear those things up and make certain shifts to actually be able to hold the big vision that I had, set for myself. And it was on the other side of realizing that and overcoming all of those challenges that came my way that I then went on to reach that goal. And it was definitely a challenge, but now I understand exactly what you just said, that challenges will arise to truly see, well, are you ready for this? Do you actually want this?
Do you want it?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the question. Like, how much do you want it? And again, even if you have to pause because of, a situation that occurs in your life, if you still want it, you will always come back to it.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like, I'm forever going to be investing in coaches. I believe in long-term, consistent, high-level mentorship, but no coach has to convince me to show up. Like, no one has to keep me accountable or make me do certain tasks. Like, I want to do it because I want this so badly and I love it so much. Like, I don't need to be convinced or motivated or inspired to do it. I need to be educated on how to improve what I'm doing. And I love the proximity and the support in challenging times, right? But I don't need to be convinced to do the work because this is what I'm here to do. And I think, I'm pretty strict now with who I even work with in the first place, because I do need to see that level of commitment on their end before I work with them. Otherwise, it's going to be a very difficult time for me and for the client if they're like half in it. And when I say half in it, I don't mean that they can't be working on other things or having other priorities, but meaning like they're doing this because they truly want it, not because they feel like they should have it or it might be nice if it works out or whatever. Like, they need to be like, no, I fucking want this and I'm going to make this work. I'm not going to let time, money, or any reason like stop me from reaching my goals, essentially. And of course, challenges come, and like you said, we can navigate different paths and things like that, but essentially, like, if there is a will, there's a way, and I truly believe that.
Absolutely. And for your listeners, like for everybody listening, show up for your coach, like warts and all. I think, and obviously the space that I work in is quite different, but similar challenges. Like, if you want to make the change and you want that support, your coach is not there to fix you first and foremost. They're not there to solve your problems for you. They're there to help and support you. But we can't support you through things that we don't know. So if you have a story, if you have a belief, if you have something going around in your mind and you're not telling your coach, then maybe, and if you feel like there's some sort of friction, or you're not, you don't feel seen or something, do they know? Like, do they know what's going on? And likewise, if you have something personal going on in the background, tell them. Like, you don't have to go to the ins and outs, but we can't support you if we don't know what's going on. And as you said, like, it's excuses. Like, I had a 6-figure business in my first year going full time. Since having a baby, I've had another 6-figure year, and I'm working, like, I actually cringe with how little that I'm working because it feels uncomfortable, because I want to be working more, but I can't. But he starts childcare soon, so I can work more. But it's like, the stories you tell yourself are the things that are going to limit you. But if you invest in a coach, invest in them fully, invest in yourself, you will get out what you put in, but you need to be transparent. There's no point showing up to calls and thinking that, like, pretending that everything's good and pretending that you're fine and pretending that you don't have these stories going on, because you're not going to fix them. You're not going to resolve them or actually acknowledge them. And if you don't acknowledge them, they're just going to sit there and lay dormant and continue to ruminate. So show up.
I just
sassy Jaci, show up.
That. No, honestly, I could not agree more, because some people think that they're going to join a program and all their problems are just going to be disappeared and someone's going to do it all for them. And sure, there is, like, for example, in my program, I provide a lot of things like done for them to make it easier and things like that. But essentially, I could have the best program in the world and I love my program. But if you don't show up to it, then it doesn't matter how good it is, it's not going to work. Like, you actually have to take action. I can support you. I can hold space for you. I can provide the tools. I can provide the scripts and templates and resources, and I can give 500% to the calls. But if you don't show up to the calls, if you don't ask for support, if you don't take action on what it is you ask for support on, it's not going to work, right? Like, you actually have to lift a finger, essentially. And so there's like this whole chat on social media around, it's like with ease and abundance and things like that. And I use that terminology because when you do have the right processes, yes, it does start to feel easeful. Like, I don't feel like I'm hustling away and, it's all hard work. Like, money is coming in, and that can feel easeful. But the reason that's happening to begin with is because of the work I've put in. That's why it's easeful, not that it's necessarily easy and you don't have to work. Like, no, you have to work, especially
the first couple of years.
Yeah.
The first couple of years, you have to work hard. And I think, you and I are both very much like, we don't want to sacrifice things because we've done the hard work initially. So I think to start off with, and everyone's level of success is different. Maybe you don't want a full-time business. Maybe you just want something on the side because you love what you do, and that's okay. But if you want it to get to the point that you want it to, you actually have to show up. Like, it is going to be hard. Some things do need to be sacrificed. Maybe you don't go out boozing with your mates every weekend, or, there's things like that. Like Saturday mornings you're working instead of, I don't know, watching Netflix or something. And there was something that you touched on that I was going to mention. You said that people show up for coaching and expect all their problems to go away. I almost look at it as every time I work with a coach, my problems are going to come to the surface, because then you can get rid of them, right? Then you can work through them. They're not going to magically disappear, but they will disappear if you allow them to show up.
Yes, I love that so much. I could talk about this for hours because I'm so passionate about it, because you hear so many people that like don't get results in programs and things like that. And I start to worry about that individual. I'm like, I'm sure it's not always the coach's fault. Like, I'm sure you're playing a role in this as well. Like it's the individual's responsibility to get a great experience out of a program. And unfortunately, there are coaches out there that don't, provide a great service for whatever reason, right? And I've heard, unfortunately, so many people kind of be screwed over in programs, which is so unfortunate. But also, I really think it is up to the individual to make the most out of it. So, for example, I've invested in some people or situations in the past that I didn't have the best experience, but do you know what? They're equally as valuable as the ones that have given me great results, because I learned exactly what not to do. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's how I created my whole mastermind was, I was investing in programs that were only really teaching one rigid, structured, masculine, step-by-step way, and not teaching you the mindset part of it, or the energetics piece, or maybe giving you another process if that doesn't resonate with you,
or the feminine part.
Exactly. So like, that's kind of how I did that.
One thing I just quickly want to touch on, if you have experienced trauma, hard times, adversity, which we all have, it's really important to firstly do the healing work, do the inner work, become self-aware. But if you're playing the victim, and when I say playing the victim, if you have a victim mentality of it never works for me, it's so hard. And again, I'm not making you wrong for this. It is so normal for anyone to go through something challenging and have that mindset. I definitely did for a while, like for quite a while. When you make the commitment to start a business, especially a coaching business, you need to step out of that. And there's going to be a lot of personal development and inner healing work to do that. And this is like just reiterating what you said around that results piece. If you're coming in going, oh, why do I never get the results? Why is it so hard for me? What's your victim story, right? Is it from something from your past? Is it your money story? Is it a comparison story? Like, where is the victim story? And, this is obviously, I'm becoming an energy coach as well. Like, there's a lot of energetics that lie underneath this. And, you can do it with mindset work as well, but you need to take ownership and responsibility for your actions, but don't play the victim. If I don't see anything as failure, like, it's just learning. If things don't go to plan, okay, cool. Yeah. I'm learning something for the next time, but you need to take, and this, like, I guess reiterating what we spoke about on my podcast, you need to take radical self-responsibility.
Yeah. I'm such a big fan of self-responsibility. And I know that for people that maybe have been in the habit of being in the victim, again, not making that wrong. Like, most people, I'm sure, have experienced that at one point, and, there's a reason people do it, I suppose. So that's completely fine. But I think when people are really, like, truly in that state of I'm a victim, right? Hearing the word self-responsibility sounds like a lot of work. It's like, oh, it's triggering. I have to do all this. It's all my fault. And it's like, here's the thing. Fault and responsibility are two different things. Like, what someone does to me, like, that might not be my fault, but it is my responsibility to make certain decisions from that place. You know, I cannot control what friends, clients, family members think, say, and do, but I can control how I respond to it. And so if you don't take self-responsibility, I actually see that as a much harder route to live life, because everything's just happening to you. It's like, oh, well, this person was mean to me, I can't show up today. Or, oh, this person didn't pay my invoice, so I can't run a business now. And like just victim, and just like being hit with all these things. Whereas if you take self-responsibility, you can actually make the necessary changes to live life on your terms, not on someone else's terms. Like, you know, so many people say, oh, well, my children or my husband's in a bad mood or whatever. And absolutely, like, there's a time and place where those things are totally valid. But also, what can we do to make the best out of this current situation? You know, what is in our control here? And I think just having that slight shift in perspective in certain times can be really beneficial if you catch yourself in this pattern of always getting stuck and finding it really difficult to move forwards. Like, you want to pick up on, what is the pattern here and what can I do about it?
Yeah. And if things don't go right, don't take it personally.
Yeah.
Like, if you're talking to a potential client, they don't sign, it's not a personal thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you know, you wouldn't work with someone that isn't right for you. So, and it's almost a blessing, but things will go wrong. Don't take it personally. Use it as you said, like, use it as growth and a way to move forward, as opposed to something that stops you.
100%. I think we could talk about this for literally hours. We better wrap it up now, but I just want to thank you so much for your time, your energy, your wisdom, your expertise. I think this conversation I'm going to refer people back to over and over again, because I think we spoke into so many topics like quite deeply today. And yeah, just really want to acknowledge you for your story and how far you've come and how you're helping other people, because it's really big stuff. And it's on the other side of that you can experience true joy and fulfillment and freedom. And it's nice for you to like share your story so people know there is a way out, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and you know, you can really turn things around through making certain decisions and receiving the correct support. So thank you so much for sharing that.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me. And we get to pave our own path, right? So if you're listening, pave your own path.
Absolutely. And all Jaci's information on where to find her will be in the show notes.
If you're ready to make money as a life coach, I want to invite you to join my Rise to Coach program, where I teach you how to make your first sale, which is the hardest part of building any coaching business. It's risk-free. You either love it or I give you your money back. Just head over to sofiarosebernardi.com/rise to coach. We'll see you inside.